Our first email question says, is it rude to play music in a vehicle really loud? I was in someone's vehicle with some loud music and nobody around the driver asked to listen to his music, so it seems rude to play it so loud. Or is this just my controlling mother playing in my head, telling me that everything is wrong and she gets to control everything? The driver of the car gets to do what he wants, pretty much, unless he's not the owner of the car. So I'm going to assume the driver owns the car. He has a right to play loud music, but that doesn't make it right. So having a right doesn't make it right. So you can have a right to do something, but be rude to do it. You have a right to use vulgar language in your living room, in your home, with other people present, but that doesn't make it right to do. If the driver of the car is loving and the music is loud or the taste is questionable, I've been admittedly somewhat surprised to hear the lyrics of some pieces of music these days, words that many of which I've never spoken. If he were loving, then he would ask people about the selection of the music and the volume. Because even though he has a right to do it, being inconsiderate of other people's feelings to the point where it's either painful or emotionally painful, pretty inconsiderate. But you can't make him be thoughtful. You can ask if he'd be willing to turn the volume down. But if you have a tone, then you're attacking him for being rude to you. It's just kind of a trading of attacks. If it's sufficiently loud, you can also say, would you please pull over and you can get another ride to wherever you're going. You can get a taxi. You don't have to sit. For example, I've told my children from the time they were young that if they got in a car with somebody who had been drinking and they wouldn't change places with somebody who hasn't been drinking, then they demand that the car be pulled over and get a taxi and come home that way. So you're not stuck. People just inevitably feel trapped, and turns out there's an option almost always. And of course, it's a good lesson for you in future situations where you are, pick a thing, driving, playing music. It can apply to the topic of conversation that you're leading, any number of activities, to be sensitive to the selection of what you do and what you say around other people, to be considerate of them. So the lesson here is really for you, and to understand about your own choices and that you're never trapped. I'm going to talk about a mother of two boys, ages 7 and 10. We'll call her Deb. She read the Real Love and Parenting book. She has talked to me about parenting on many occasions, but then I talked to her husband and learned how she behaves with her sons. So she lays out their clothes. They're 7 and 10 now, not 1 and 3. She lays out their clothes for school the night before. She helps them brush their teeth. She gets their pajamas out to wear. She gets them up in the morning, and then she's right behind them every step of the morning, making sure they're on schedule, nagging them, doing things for them, putting their shirt on, making sure that they eat the right breakfast, take a bite of that, hurry up and do this. In other words, micromanaging every little step. She helps them do their homework. If they do their homework and they leave it at home, she takes it to school. In other words, she either manages or rescues them every minute that they're awake. Now, if you ask her, she says, because I have, she says that this is just what good mothers do when they take care of their children. And, you know, a lot of people buy that. Oh, what a caring mother. In fact, Deb's friends are effusive in their praise of her being a great mother because of the energy and the concern that she devotes to being a good parent. Well, who could deny the outward evidence of her serving her children, right? I mean, she's serving them. So obviously, she must be loving them. No, we have to ask who is she helping? And what is she really doing? In fact, all of us need to be asking that question about any apparently good thing that we do. Sure, part of her does care about her son's happiness. I know her, and part of her does care. But mostly out of ignorance, some for other reasons, her motivation consists of the following mix. She has a need to be seen as a good parent by her kids, by these other mothers who say, "Oh, you're such a great mother. I wish I was as good a mother as you." I mean, mothers would die to hear such a phrase. She has a need for her children to thank her for serving them, which of course she ensures by reminding them to thank her. That's kind of like a clue. She has a need to feel important. She has a need to have a secure role in life, a purpose in life. If you're a busy mother raising kids and you're frantically taking care of them and doing things for them, well, then you feel like you've got a purpose. And nobody can ever accuse you of not being busy or having your priorities right. See how clever this is? Oh, well, I'd really like to help you do that, but I'm doing something for Fred or Mark or Sam or whatever. You always have a built-in excuse to not do other things and to be constantly busy with them. So it sounds like I'm reading her mind. How could I know her motivations? In fact, how dare I say that her motivations are mixed and involve these selfish ones? Well, because I know her. Because she gets irritated with her children if they don't follow the tightly regimented schedule. If you get irritated at a child who doesn't willingly submit to your rule, well, then that couldn't possibly be for the child's benefit, could it? How else do I know? Because her care of the children interferes with her marriage. Her husband needs time with her. Oh, I can't. I have to put Freddie to bed. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to all day long. And by the time she's done taking care of the kids and putting them to bed late, well, there's no time left for her and her husband. And she's always too busy for that. So it couldn't be purely motivated because it affects the family in so many negative ways. It affects the kids negatively as they're nagged. It affects her husband. And she prefers to get clothes out for her children, for example, who are easily old enough to do everything she does for them, over spending time with her husband, who feels neglected and even dismissed. These are undeniable indications, actually proofs, that her motivations are primarily selfish. Does this make her a bad person? No, but somewhere she was either neglected and has made up for it by being an overprotective and overserving mother, or she had an overprotective and manipulating and controlling mother, which turns out is the case. So what else is wrong with what Deb is doing? She's teaching her children that they're helpless and weak. You wouldn't think that wouldn't be your first conclusion, but look what she's doing. If she's constantly having to do things like put on a child's shirt, well, what is she telling the kid? Well, you're not capable of doing this, right? Here, let me button up your shirt. Well, what a message. It sounds helpful, but it tells the kid, you're such a moron, I have to button up your shirt. She's also teaching them to obey her. She's making it personal, rather than to do the right things simply because they work. We taught our children from the time they were really little, way younger than this, the reason that you do things that you're supposed to do is because, well, it works better. You get to have the privilege of bedtime stories and songs. If you get up on time, you get to ride the bus to school, or we take you to school, as opposed to if you don't get up on time, you get to walk to school. Doing the right thing has inherent rewards. And if kids don't learn that lesson, they grow up pretty much ruined. She's also stealing from these kids the opportunities that they need in order to learn to be responsible. Remember, children are guaranteed to be happy when they're loved, loving, and responsible. With her overprotective caretaking, she's actually contributing to her children being unhappy for a lifetime. Now, it would be easy for somebody to think, well, aren't you kind of exaggerating the effects of this, of her smothering them? I wish I were. Not at all. I regularly work with adults 20, 30, and more years after they've been cared for, as Deb is caring for her kids, and they feel entitled. They don't know how to take care of themselves. They have a hard time making decisions because, well, mom made all their decisions for them. They become disgruntled and unproductive employees. I have quite a number of friends who are CEOs or owners of businesses, and they say that, kids who are in their 20s come to work, and by lunchtime, they're wondering, well, when do I get a trophy for finishing my first half day of work? And it's because they had mothers who were constantly doing stuff for them and then patting them on the back and praising them for, lifting their fork to their mouth correctly. And their relationships, the relationships these kids have are a nightmare. I mean, imagine two kids getting together whose mothers did everything for them and then waking up in the morning and looking at the other one and going, well, aren't you going to get out of bed and dress me? Although that's a slight exaggeration, the situations aren't. These relationships are horrible because each person expects the other one to make them happy. And it all happens because the children were not loved and taught, which is what the parenting book is about from beginning to end. Instead, they were spoiled and protected. Spoiled, protected, and served is not the same as loved and taught. Spoiled, protected, and served does not create a responsible child. Our goal as parents is to love and teach our children in a way that they can be independent and happy for a lifetime. That's why we're here, is to create happy, loving, and independent children. We are not here to take care of their every need and protect them from inconvenience and pain and make their lives, we're not here to be a fun park. So there are serious dangers that result from over-parenting. That's really a lousy term because parenting is a good thing. I don't know how you overdo good parenting. It's actually the imitation of parenting that's the problem. New subject. Somebody wrote me and said, well, today was not a good day at work. This is probably an understatement. Today was one of those days I would like to forget, but it will probably stick in my memory for a long time. I want to say that I would like to erase this day, but I'm pretty sure I need to learn something. I want to learn something. My small department at work is going to begin a new process on Tuesday. And I was ready for that, but what I did not know until today is that the new process has many parts that I didn't know about, parts that we do not have reasonable information about. We have a team that we've never even met showing up Tuesday morning to help us with this process. Well, we don't even know what the process is completely, so how are we supposed to integrate this team? And I didn't even know they were coming, or why they were coming, or what they're going to do. I started to fall apart. Well, I can understand how that would be stressful since you're the manager of the department that's being given this new project. It's a new project, it's inadequate information. You're faced with a great big bucket of the unknown, which nobody really likes very much. And the unknown often leads to mistakes. You may not look your best, but you're terrified of failure. That is the problem, not the unknown. I face the unknown almost every time I have a conversation with somebody during the day because I have no idea what condition they're going to be in or what they're going to talk about or what factors they're going to bring into the conversation. The unknown's not the problem. The fear of the unknown is crippling. You continue. This makes me think that my staff will think I am stupid because I did not know about these details. And I do not ever want to be stupid. Now, that is a problem. Again, you fear looking stupid. You fear the unknown. It's the fear that's the problem. Being stupid is inevitable, meaning we're not going to look like we know what we're doing. If we're in the process of learning, how could we look like we know what we're doing? Looking stupid, in addition to being stupid, is inevitable. The trick is that you have to not mind being and looking stupid. That sounds so simple. It is. Because stupid is part of the process of learning. You have to not mind that or you'll never learn. So we want to grow, we want to learn, and then we say, but don't give me anything that I don't already know. Well, this is impossible. That need to avoid disapproval that you have is just really controlled your life. Somebody simply didn't inform you about this project that's happening on Tuesday or the people that are coming. Well, tough. Don't make it about you. Make it about the project and simply do it. Figure it out. Because it is possible to figure it out. You might have a half an hour of chaos. Who cares? You're paid to be the manager. So it's your job to make this work. And it doesn't matter what kind of hand they dealt you. You continue. I like to be the one in the know, the one in control. And when I don't have control, I freak. I become tremendously afraid. There's that word again. I'm afraid people will think I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm defective, and then I become defensive. I work very hard to have information, to know details, to know what, when, how, and then today I'm blindsided. No, dear, you're not blindsided. When you're the manager of a division and somebody above you decides that your job's just going to be different, well, then it's just going to be different. Blindsided implies that somebody's trying to do something to you. It's a purely victim word. Nope. You just woke up in the morning and things ain't going to be as you thought. Well, tough. I was a surgeon for 20 years. Every time I operated on somebody, I never knew what was going to happen. 9 out of 10 times or more, an operation would go exactly like it's gone 1,000 times before. But every once in a while, things would just happen, even if I didn't make mistakes. I didn't have time during the middle of an operation to stop and go, well, that does it. I am not going to put up with being blindsided by this. This is just unfair that I wasn't told that this complication was going to occur. You see how silly this is sounding? In other words, stuff just happens, baby. And when I'm in the middle of an operation, there was nobody there to save me, hold my hand, kiss me on the cheek, say, oh, I'm so sorry that things aren't going like you hoped. Nope, you just do the work. The preparation for this new process you're talking about has been horrible. And there's been a huge gap in communication. Yep, this is you talking. True. Believe it or not, yes, I am being sarcastic. I was left out of some very important conversations. Some of the new processes make no sense to me, and it's very important for me for things to make sense. I was in a complete tailspin. All my fears were throwing me into a vortex. Baby, this just ain't hard. It really isn't. You're the manager. They're sending in a whole bunch of people to help you. If you missed the meeting, I can promise you that not everybody missed the meeting. That some of the people coming in didn't miss the meeting. You're going to really hate hearing this part, but it's the truth. If you have a need to control things, and when something new is proposed, you, in your words, and this was in capital letters, if you freak and become tremendously afraid. So I want you to imagine being your boss. And something new has to happen within the next couple of days. And you, being the boss, know that the person working for you, in this case, you, freaks out every time something new happens. Would you invite you to a meeting where you were told that everything was going to be different? If I were your boss, I wouldn't invite you to the meeting either. I would just spring everything on you since you're going to freak either way. I'd rather not be there. And that's probably what happened. So the boss went, oh, wow, she's going to freak out if we spring this new thing on her. So we'll just wait till the last second and freak out. And at least I'll be on a beach in Florida when she freaks out. You have a tremendous fear of looking bad. You have to lose it. We all do. We have to just keep moving. Looking bad, fear of looking bad is not a step toward accomplishing anything. Freaking out is not a step. So when Tuesday morning comes and you freak out, that's not going to make things better. That's not going to instill confidence in the people that you supervise. You're going to screw everything up worse, not because of the new process, but because of your being afraid. You continue. I wanted to stop myself, but it was like something else had taken over my body. I was out of control. Well, yeah, because you freak out every time something new happens. But see, things seem to happen out of your control only after you've made the judgment that everything's going to go to hell because you're not going to look good. So it seems like things just go out of control. No, that follows after you make a choice that you don't want to look bad. You have to lose that. You have to be willing to look bad. You have to not care. While I was in this vortex, I did something completely brilliant. I called my medical director, the one who has never been supportive. I complained about the lack of communication, that the lack of information and the combination of these two things were going to make it more difficult for my staff to buy into the new process. I was basically told, I don't even need to keep reading to kind of know what you were basically told by your boss, because your boss doesn't like to work with you while you're a perfectionist and hate every little change. But let's keep reading. I was basically told it didn't matter if we were not properly prepared for this change, and he didn't care one way or the other. That's what I was telling you earlier. If I were your boss, I'd be going, well, you're going to freak either way, so just get the job done. I don't care. So he told me, just do it, and he doesn't care if I like any of it. It seems that I know your boss already. The moment you began complaining to your boss about how it all inconvenienced, hang on, not the people in the department, not the people who were going to be subjects of the study, you complained about how it all inconvenienced who? You. You made it all about you. As soon as you did that, his ears and his mind just shut down. Everybody who's listening, listen to this, because we all do variations of this. We go charging in and saying, it's not fair, and look what's being done to me. And then we wonder why the conversation goes badly. And that's because the boss really doesn't want to hear that. The boss wants the job to get done. You cash a check every 2 weeks for doing exactly this kind of thing, for being flexible, for handling things that are unknown and difficult. And then you come in and complain that he didn't make your job easy. Well, frankly, people hate complainers. Bosses especially hate complainers. Now, I'm not saying it would have gone differently if you had been different, but you do have a tendency, strong tendency, to make changes about you. And I can tell you, people back away from that. They hate it. You continue. I was hoping for some support. I quickly realized my mistake in calling him, and I confirmed that I understood the importance of beginning the new process. I'm the one who explained to him last week why we needed to do this. Well, then kind of in my mind, I'm going, if you're the one who told him you needed to implement the new process, then what are you complaining about? The only thing that you didn't know was the date when it was going to start. You already had this new process in mind, or you wouldn't have recommended it. So your boss wouldn't have much sympathy. You continue. I was mad. I was very, very mad. That's two verys. And I wanted somebody to know it and to care that I was mad. I must have been mad to think such thoughts. I'm at work. I'm here to do a job. I'm not here for people to care about me. Well, you got one thing right here so far. That's exactly the point I'm making. It's a job. It's not life or death. And your supervisors and others only care if the job gets done. If that inconveniences you, they just don't really care. Most supervisors don't, because you're paid to do this. You just have to buck up and get it done and not make it about you. You say, but I wanted somebody to care about me. Well, I get it. I care about you. But they don't have to, because part of their job description is not to love you. Their job description is to get a whole bunch of things done, and you're just one of the people they manage. You say, I guess fear is at the bottom of all this. Yeah, I'm afraid of not being important. I'm smart. I know my job well. I do my job well, but I don't get promoted, and I feel like my ideas get dismissed. So now, do you see why your ideas get dismissed? Do you see why you don't get promoted? You know who we promote? We promote the people who are going to do an adequate job, maybe not the best job, maybe not the most anal retentive, everything falling within the lines job. No, we want somebody who does an adequate job and who we get along with, who doesn't create crises out of nothing. You don't make the job number one, honey. You make you number one. So they don't listen. They don't like it. You say, today I just want to pull my knees close to my chest and sit in the corner and cry. I know that's not the answer, but it's what I feel like doing, so I'm reaching out for help. Well, here's the help. And it isn't the warm little pat on your head that you were looking for, nor the warm little pat on your head that you were hoping your boss would give you. Remember the times I have loved you. Remember the times other people have loved you, held you, cared about you. That has to be enough, because work won't fill that function for you. You're there to do a job, and you've got to get over this terror of looking bad and making mistakes. It's paralyzing you and actually causing you to make bigger mistakes. Really important stuff, kid, for not just you, but, I'm going to guess half the people who are listening. New subject. The other day, the kids, this is from a mother, the kids were playing loudly and they woke me up before I wanted to get up. And I was grumpy, and I spent the next 30 minutes stewing in bed and thinking up all sorts of ways that I could punish them for it. So I got up and I made sure that they knew that they had inconvenienced me. I got ready for work without greeting them in the morning, and I walked out the door without a goodbye. I guess I showed them, right? Now, for those of you who are listening, she's getting the humor of this by the end, but she wasn't getting the humor of it when she was in bed and stomping out the door. Way to show the little ingrates, Mom. Way to go. We'll send you a whip to do a more thorough job next time. You say, I got to work and I decided to text a coach, and we exchanged some texts. That helped a lot, more than a lot. And this is why we need people that we can reach out to and remind us that we're okay. Remind us that they love us. Remind us that trust works. Instead of reaching out to our kids to love us and be considerate. So when I got home, I talked to the kids about how I'd been a butthead that morning. And this is what my daughter said to me. Oh, I don't care about that. That was this morning. All I care about is that you're back to normal now. I love kids. Beautiful. How lovely and forgiving. You conclude by saying, I just chuckled and felt pretty darn grateful that my normal now has shifted from being a bitch of a mother all the time to being happy and peaceful and loving. And my kids see that and they feel that. and they're happy. And when I do get crazy for a moment, they're strong enough in my love that it doesn't scare them. It barely even makes an impression. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, very cool. And a lesson for everybody. If you establish a pattern, a consistent pattern of loving your kids, friends, spouse, lover, people at work, you can make mistakes and they'll get over them because they'll go, having a bad day. If we haven't established a pattern and we have a bad day, they just roll their eyes and go, not again. And they don't want anything to do with this, like we talked about with the lady who had to deal with a new process on Tuesday. This is a woman in real love whose husband has a job as a broadcaster at a local TV station, so lots of people recognize him wherever he goes. She said, I said to my husband, would you like to go for a walk? And he said, yeah, sure. We didn't get one step out the door, and there was a neighbor lady on the sidewalk, and she asked him a question about a local story that he'd done on the news. I kept walking past him, and then I turned around to see that he was not getting the hint. I was trying to give him the hint. We said we were going to go for a walk. Instead, he was giving her a thorough off-camera interview. I thought about continuing to walk, but I just stood there. I wasn't sure what my other options were. And then he said to the little girl that was with the mother, do you want to pet the doggy that we were taking for a walk? So that was a distraction. And then the mother kept talking to him, and this lasted a long time before he finally detached and resumed the walk. And he still was kind of detached emotionally. So what can you do about this? To get angry, as seems to be kind of the theme of today's questions, to get angry and irritated, that's not going to work. Then the next time you ask him if he wants to go for a walk, he's going to go, not with you. So that's not going to work. On a separate occasion, you talk to him and you describe the pattern of your walks. You say, when we go for walks, people stop you, and then I don't get to be with you. Would he be willing to really go on a walk with you? And you describe that to him. You say, when we go out, and you're going to have to help him with the words because he obviously doesn't know the words or he'd already be saying them. So you say to him, if somebody stops you and asks you about work or broadcasting or a story or whatever, say, one thing that you could say would be, love to talk to you now, but I can't because I'm going on a walk with my little darling wife. And pretty much everybody in the world would get that point. He doesn't know the words to say. He's afraid to not please people. It's kind of part of his job to look all good and happy and pleasing on air. And so when he meets people out in the real world, he does the same thing. So if you help him with the words and then say, would you be willing to do that? The odds are pretty good that he would. If he forgets to do that, you say, if you forget, is it okay if I come up and I say those words? He would love to talk to you, but he's taking his sweet little wife, that's you, on a walk. And then you don't have to stand around feeling like a fool while he talks to people about whatever. You don't have to feel helpless. You don't have to feel trapped. You've worked the problem and solved it. And both of you will feel closer to each other as a result. There's always an answer. There really is. We don't ever have to feel like we're locked into some miserable situation. I talked to a woman new subject, who has been agonizing over how her relationship with a guy is going. Not going well, nor have the 20 other relationships before this one. She said, I've been thinking about our conversation to me. She said, here's what I learned. I think I'm still too selfish to be ready for a relationship. Yeah, that would be the bottom line. Yes. This does not make you a bad person. Does not mean that you can't learn to become a partner. You're just not yet prepared for a relationship. Never trying to be hard on you, never trying to keep you away from a partner. There are just some things you need to learn to be happier yourself before you can be a healthy partner. She said, I don't realize that my thoughts are selfish, but they are. When I stop to reflect on what you pointed out, I see that you're right. All the questions that I asked about the partner that I'm with now are, what can he do for me? When can he do it for me? How can he help me with my business? When is he going to? In other words, every question that I asked you, essentially the subject was me, me, me. Yeah, you're right. And that's pretty insightful. And that won't hurt you if you're willing to see it and address it. You don't even have to stop being selfish. I know, revolutionary thing to say, because all of our lives, none of us has ever even heard the word selfish without a tone. You're being selfish. You are so selfish. It always had that tone. You don't even have to stop it. Just be aware of your selfishness. And then gradually, as you see more loving choices, you will choose not to be selfish. You'll choose to be loving instead. Why? Because being loving is happier. Not because somebody told you that you shouldn't be selfish. That never lasts as a motivation. You continue, I want to help my partner. I want to love him. I want to love my children. I want to be a good daughter. I still don't remember often enough how to do these things. I still need more time to practice before I'm ready for a partnership. Also, I realize I thought I was good at communicating, but that seems not to be the case. I need to learn to listen better before I speak. Oh, how many of us need to say that? You'll learn, honey. You've got somebody to help you. You have me, you have other people. The conversation last night was a complete success. This is what I meant by my not being disappointed or impatient with you last night. I was confident that you would learn exactly the things that you're talking about now. And you couldn't have done that until you first dealt with your selfishness and you were willing to tell the truth about it. So good for you. Again, another theme of today's chat. Before we can learn anything, we have to make the mistakes. You have to. They're unavoidable. And if you hide the mistakes, if you insist on looking good and not admitting the mistakes, you're doomed to never learn. So you're doomed to keep making the same mistakes you say you don't want to make. Have to be willing to make them and not mind. This is a story, Sylvie's story, although it involves Bruce. Her brother, they started off as Sylvie's stories, and sometimes they're Sylvie's siblings. Bruce is now, oh, I hate this moment, 5, 4. Someday I'm going to get these right. Bruce's mother writes, the kids can be really competitive, and they can turn eating, brushing teeth, buckling in the car, everything into a race. And sometimes it just gets to be exhausting. Exhausting for me, exhausting for them. You know, last one to the front door is a rotten egg. The last one to buckle up is a rotten egg. The last one to, just constant competition. It's just kind of part of being little kids because they want to be able to do things well. And they think that if they do them first, if they're the winner, well, then they must be doing them well. So walking home from the park, Bruce, 4 years old, started slowing down his pace. And I heard him scheming, mumbling under his breath, I want to be a rotten egg. I like this kid. I'm going to be seeing him in a few days. And once he was at the back of the group, he shouted, last one to the back door is a rotten egg. So he'd wanted to be the rotten egg, and he made himself the rotten egg. he won a really kind of bizarre self-described race. What a sense of humor. If only adults could do that. I got an email that said, this morning I had a surprising experience. I was walking with my wife, pretty relaxed, and then suddenly she thought of an old associate named, we'll say, Fred, which happens to be the name of the guy who's writing this email. So an old associate with the same first name as her husband. And she began to say something about him. She raised her voice to make her point. And as soon as she raised her voice, all I heard was my name being shouted. And immediately my insides just cringed top to bottom with fear, because I never heard my name spoken as a child with a tender tone. Every single time my name was spoken, it was spoken loudly, in anger, with criticism. And even though she wasn't talking about me, I cringed. I flashed back to her scolding me in the past for being inconsiderate or whatever. Talk about PTSD. It took many minutes for me to come down from that false alarm. The more I read about PTSD, the more I understand about people, the more serious I see this is. There was an extensive neurologic study that showed that children have an innate desire to connect in a healthy way with the people around them. They keep trying, but after they've tried a certain number of times for long enough and failed consistently, then they quit trying to form healthy connections, and all they can imagine are unhealthy ones. They're doomed for life. They can't even imagine a healthy connection anymore. So by the time a kid is usually 4 years old, if he hasn't had truly healthy and consistent connections with other people, he's usually pretty doomed until he's dead from age 4. So, like this writer says, took me many, many minutes to come down from this false alarm, just from hearing my name spoken loudly. I really see how all of us are hypervigilant, scanning our environment for evidence that we're being attacked. 24/7, we're looking for either imitation love or pain. Clearly, we were made to live in a world practicing unconditional love, because that's the only place where we can function properly. The world we live in is an aberration. It is hell. I sometimes say to people when they're here and they say, well, I'm happier than I've ever been in my whole life here. But what happens when I go out into the real world? That's the problem. It's not the real world. The world outside of anything loving is the aberration. It's like living in the Matrix, if you've seen that movie series. Love is the real world. Everything else is hell. He finishes, I'm grateful to be given a contrasting experience, that I have felt loved so I can see all of this more clearly. Yeah, it's a really different way to live. It's the healthy way to live. Well, actually, it's the only way to live, because the other way isn't living. It's just surviving. It's like hanging on by our fingernails. I'm going to kind of distill a conversation that I had with a young mother. Her husband, we'll call him the father, doesn't matter what his name is, was yelling at their 2-year-old to put on his socks. Well, we already know how this is going to go, right? I mean, what 2-year-old, almost 3, is going to look up at his father and say, you know, Dad, I was having trouble putting these socks on, but now that you're yelling at me, I'm just really feeling the love and the motivation. So now I'm going to put my socks on. When has that ever happened in the history of mankind? Never. And yet we still have stupid parents yelling at their children to do something right, like put on their socks. So predictably, this little 2-year-old is now crying. It turns out, who knew, that Crying interferes with the putting on of socks. You can't do both. You can't be sobbing and putting on your socks when you're 2 years old. Duh. And the father then, to make this just maximally stupid, kept repeating over and over again. The mother's watching this from out in the hall. The father kept saying, "Why are you crying? What are you crying about?" It's a comedy of errors if it weren't also tragic. So now we got a kid who's crying because his dad's yelling at him, now crying because he's being asked a question that he couldn't even imagine answering. Why are you crying? Give me a sec, Dad. Because you're an idiot and you're treating me like I'm a fool. What 2-year-old's going to say that while he's sobbing? This just couldn't get stupider. We've got a child who's afraid and crying, so what do? We pour on to the child more fear and anger. This is just insanity. The mother says, so what's happening here? My husband was not listening to the needs of our child. And so then the mother went in and asks to speak to the father. She takes him outside in the hall. This is brilliant. Never correct your husband who is insane if he's yelling at a 2-year-old. Never correct him while he's standing there being insane with the 2-year-old. So the mother says to the father, "Would you like to try something or hear something that works better with our son?" And the father shocked her by saying, "Well, sure, I suppose," out of desperation, because he wasn't enjoying this either. And he's been watching her with their son for 2 years now in real love and has seen that she has consistently better results than he does. So he says, "Sure." And she said, "He's feeling controlled and he hates it. And he's not feeling loved and he hates that. So try this." And so the father did. The father took 2 pairs of socks in and said in a calm voice, "So would you like to put on this pair or would you like to put on this pair?" And because his tone of voice was different, the anger was gone, the yelling was gone, the controlling was gone because he gave him a choice which pair of socks he wanted to put on. It's not like there was only one pair. The kid immediately picked one of the pairs of socks and put it on. Probably used the other pair of socks to wipe his runny nose. Solve the problem. First, you have to eliminate the fear. Then you can deal with the socks. And in this case, you can do them both kind of simultaneously. It's really kind of fun. We're just not trapped in hellacious situations. This is an email from a woman in real life. She said, "When my husband Mark came home last night, I was cooking dinner and he said, 'Do you need help?' I should have said, 'No, you just go have a seat and watch a game or whatever.' But I didn't. I said, 'Well, here's the recipe card if you'd like to join in.' Oh, you've already made a mistake." So he did what he usually does. He took over, which I was okay with. No, see, that's your second mistake. You thought you were okay with it. You thought you could endure it. But see, now you've got the mistake of offering him to help you and knowing that he's going to take over. And then he comes in and he does take over. And you're not okay with that. You're already too deep in the hole. So he took over, and then I peeled and I diced the potatoes like the directions said, or so I thought. I mean, it wasn't complicated. I was boiling potatoes. I can boil potatoes, so it couldn't be that hard. Now I say I can boil potatoes. I never do. But theoretically, I have some notion of what it's like to boil potatoes. She says, "How can you mess up boiling potatoes?" But when I put them on the stove, he said, "I think you got those potatoes too big." I'm laughing because you knew this was going to happen, and yet you said okay when he said, "Do you need some help?" I said nothing. You've been with him long enough. This is no surprise. Then I went over to the pot and I said, okay, well, it's easy to make them smaller. And so I stabbed every piece of potato with a fork, cut it in half, and put it back in. And he said, okay, they're smaller. And I thought I was okay. Oh, you're so silly. This is why Donna and I almost never share being in charge of a job. We're simply different. We have different preferences, which is delightful. The differences complement each other. So one person is designated the boss of a particular project, the king or queen, if you like, of a particular job, or part of a job, like peeling and dicing the potatoes or whatever. Then the other person's job is to stay out of the job where the king or the queen is in charge of it, or to take exact instructions from the king or queen of that project without modification. There can only be one head. That doesn't make that person better, simply gives the project one direction, which is kind of obviously necessary. Otherwise, you have a situation that is, I can't resist saying this word, amphibenic. You're going to have to look that up. It's a Greek mythologic creature that has two heads. You can't have a project going in two different directions. At one point, she continues, I looked at the potatoes and said, they're going to need a few more minutes. Since I know her and I know him, I know what's next. And he said, yeah, that's because they're still too big. All of this over potato pieces. And that is when I remember getting annoyed, she said. I said, yeah, they'll need a few more minutes. It's okay. And he went to the pot and said, again, lifts up the lid, they're too big. I'm assuming with the tone of voice that you would say, and there are cockroaches in there too. I left the kitchen. I tried to remember the present truth. I tried to remember that he was just drowning, but I was thinking, oh no, dinner and very possibly life as we know it will be ruined because this one chunk of potato is too big. He can't help it, kid. He has to have order in his life. He has to have certainty. He just has to have it. He has a job where his whole job is to be ordered and certain about what he does. But not about you. He has to let go of that at home. In time, he'll be able to put you before his need for order, but not yet. And you know that. So you can't expect him to just suddenly be different. So what are the lessons to everybody who's listening, not just to you? Always, if you're doing something with somebody, agree on a project supervisor. You have to agree on it. You can't just say, I'm the boss here. And you do that before you even get to a project. 2, never be the person who picks at stuff and criticizes. It's just flat annoying. 3, your partner criticizes because of something missing for them. It's not worth arguing about. It's about them. Figure out a way for it not to happen next time. She says, after dinner, I decided that I needed to do something loving for him. Well, that's actually pretty brilliant because the two of you are going to war over a piece of potato. So somebody has to break this insane cycle of fear. You say, I rubbed his shoulders and I looked at his neck. I was alarmed at the look of his neck. It looks weathered and beaten down, and unaware to him, he was kind of hunching over because his neck was sunburned and weathered. And so I said, your neck has a lot of sun exposure. It's like watching two trains come together on the same track. From opposite directions, you can see the train wreck's going to happen and there's nothing you can do. Your neck has a lot of sun exposure. And he said, I'm putting sunscreen on it. So you are doing with his neck almost the same thing that he did with the potatoes. You could have volunteered to rub his neck with the too big piece of potato, but you didn't. So you got to learn, we have to learn when to shut up. So what if he does need more sunscreen? Tell him another time. You never mention it while you're doing something else, like for him, like rubbing his neck or discussing another subject. You never do it while there's tension in the room over really serious things like the size of potato cubes. You bring it up as a separate subject and with no tone. There was a lot to learn from this little interchange, like lots. Not going to have time for the next one. So in every situation that we discussed here, we just have reemphasized what we all know. We have to find the real love in our life, or we're kind of doomed. You can see that in every case that we talked about. Find it, then trust it. Many people here, in fact, every person who wrote here has found real love. Every person. None of these were from people who haven't studied it. But then they failed to trust it when things got difficult. They didn't remember it. So we have to find it, trust it, remember it, and then the big one, the one that gives us the biggest reward, share it with the people around us. We do that, we win. We'll see you in a week.